Hello, I'm Dee,
And I'm Max.
and this is
Movies to the Max.
This video is about Hereditary. This movie because it is Max's favorite movie.
And now for the fast facts. The director is Ari Aster. The box office was $82.8 million. The cast includes Tony Shalhoub, Alex Wolff, and Millie Shapiro. It did not win any well-known awards. We know the only well-known actress from this movie is Tony Shalhoub. She's been in The Sixth Sense, Little Miss Sunshine, and Knives Out. The other actors and actresses in this have not been in too many things, except for one actress who was in The Handmaid's Tale, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Alex Wolff was also in, it's not that well known, but he was also in the Jumanji.
He was also in the Naked Brothers band. And those are the fast facts.
So, I guess what I wanted to kind of start with was kind of the way that the movie opens.
Yeah.
So the mom, whose name is Annie, builds miniatures, very realistic looking miniatures. So it's not like miniatures like for like wargaming or something like that. She builds replicas of realistic things in smaller settings, and you kind of get your viewpoint starts in on one of her miniatures, and then it transitions into the real life place and time, which I kind of think is interesting.
Yeah. Well, the next thing that happens is the main family, who includes Annie, who's played by Tony, Peter, who's played by Alex, Charlie, who's played by Millie, and Steve, who was played by, I didn't write his name down.
He's probably the least important person in the movie. In fact, it's funny because I wrote down, you don't even find out that character's name till halfway through the film.
Yeah. But this family is at the Annie's mom's funeral, and I think it's something to note at the funeral. You see Annie, her mother, in the casket, and this necklace is a symbol about her mother, and she's wearing the same necklace.
It was kind of interesting. She made the point that it was unusual. She thought it was surprising to her how many people had come to her mom's funeral, because her mom tended to be a private person, kind of expecting, like, almost to the point where she was like thinking that people were after her and stuff like that, so I found that interesting. This is one of the first times that you hear throughout the film clicks with her tongue. She goes, and that's one of the first times you hear her do it, is at the funeral. I was kind of curious. I wrote down a note here. I was curious as to if she had done that before the funeral as well.
Well, I think Charlie is definitely on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's not good with social interactions. She does that clicking sound with her tongue.
Well, so this particular movie, our conversation is going to be spoilers. So spoiler alert right now with that. I kind of wondered if maybe even from an early age she had been possessed.
Mm.
Because we find out pretty early in the movie that this Annie's mom, who had passed, would insist on feeding Charlie when Charlie was a baby, and I just find that very interesting. I wonder if that has something to do with getting the spirit into Charlie.
Mm. Throughout the movie as well, we see a lot of like very small words, Satoni, in different rooms.
I wrote down Satoya.
The first word we see is
But maybe there is another.
the words are very hard to see. So
and we maybe should have taken the time to get clips of them, or rewatch it and pause at those particular points. But this was a little bit of a harder movie to watch. We did manage to watch it, but it was a little on the more difficult side.
The purpose behind these words is that I think they're like spells to like get the family to feel a certain way, because the whole movie is based around trying to break down the brother Peter, trying to break down his psyche so that he can get possessed by Payman,
that's it.
And the reason they're trying to get Peter possessed by Payman is because the grandma made a deal with Payman to get riches and to have a happy life, and she promised Payman a firstborn son. She couldn't have any more children because she at this point had already exited that time in her life, so she was going to rely on her daughter's children, but her daughter wouldn't allow her anywhere near Peter because she was having like a no contact rule with her grandma, whose name is Ellen, by the way. But then when Charlie was born, she decided to give her grandma a chance because her grandma was getting old, or her mom was getting old, and you know, she didn't want her to be out of her life when she died. She didn't want things to be on a bad note when she died. And this is where we find, and you know, the grandma is kind of like obsessed with Charlie, going as far as breastfeeding her. And my dad made a good point. She probably even got like possession into Charlie when she was still young. So that's kind of the basis behind this movie. It's a very complicated movie, though.
I wrote down here as well, because this is one of the earlier things you see is as Annie's going through Ellen's stuff, she finds a book about spiritualism.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because she writes down, and it kind of alludes to what you're saying, is our sacrifice will pale to the rewards.
Mm-hmm. And this family sacrifices a lot just so that the grandma could have had all of her wealth and happiness. It's
kind of funny because Ellen had died at the beginning of the film, so maybe she thought that she would get those rewards in the afterlife as well.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what all this particular God offers, but the next thing we see is she kind of thinks she sees her mom back, when Annie's going through Ellen's stuff, as she's kind of leaving the room, she looks.
It's very creepy. It's very good. Around this time, we find out. Well, we don't find out, but the dad, whose name is Steve, finds out that Ellen's body was stolen from the graveyard we, the audience, don't find this out, but I've seen this movie before, and I'm watching it again. They talk about it later, but he finds out over the phone, and he tells Annie that it was just like some billing stuff.
He did want to upset her because her mom did just pass. You do kind of overhear that the gravesite had been
Yes.
Disturbed. They
Yes.
use a different word, but so I'm curious on your thoughts on this. So we'll kind of maybe come to it a little bit later. Maybe this is the time to talk about it. A bird flies into the window at Charlie's school. Did you have anything before that?
Oh, that's before we find out about the body being stolen, but yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Charlie cuts the dead bird's head off.
There's a lot of decapitation.
There's a lot of decapitation in this movie. And I have a theory. I don't know if we want to talk about this now, or I mean, we're going to talk about things out of order because I'm curious if 3 women losing their heads had to have something to do with the bringing back of payment as well, because they cut off Ellen's head.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, which we're going to get to pretty shortly, loses her head, and the mom, Annie, cuts her own head off.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get there. So I'm curious if the payment rite has something to do with decapitations.
Yeah. But then after we find out about the body getting stolen from the graveyard, we get this scene where Annie goes to like a like losing a loved one.
Wait, but before we go there, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I did make a note that someone watched her cut this bird's head off, and I'm curious if it's someone from the Payman cult.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's the main cult person, but it's definitely someone watching.
It's
her.
some random lady. I wrote down random lady at that point.
Hold on, let's make sure that. Then I get back to a week after the mother what's her name? Ellen had died. That her burial site had been desecrated. I knew there was a word. I was curious here. I don't think so, based on some of the other conversations that you get. I wondered if the dad was part of the cult. I don't. Again, I agree. I don't think so. And then now I have the coping group. So now, if you want to get into that.
So yeah, Annie goes to a losing a loved one group, and she talks about how she has a history of mental illness in her family, almost as if it's hereditary.
Oh, really?
And at one point she talks about her brother who had schizophrenia, and talked about how her mom was putting people in her brother's head. So I was wondering if she was like testing to see if she could get Payman's spirit into the brother, but it didn't work because either the brother wasn't firstborn or like something like that, or maybe age. Yeah,
that's really a good thought. I hadn't written that down. I do want to make a note just before that, and we can come back to that conversation, that the father had also died of starvation. He just quit eating.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of creepy. But yeah, so I wrote that the brother was schizophrenic and killed himself, and he blamed it on the mother for putting people inside him. That's actually, and I had come to that same conclusion, that maybe she was trying to put the payment inside of him, but I never really thought of why it didn't stick. And maybe you're right, maybe he wasn't the firstborn potentially, or maybe it was just an age thing. Interesting.
And then we get this. What?
I want to make
a scene where it's like not too far after Annie's visit to the group, and you see Peter smoking a bong in his window, and you see him from a distance, and you see some breath. So someone was watching him.
Interesting. I wrote down the word, so this is basically at the same time. I wrote down obsess much. He's got a crush on this girl that's in his class, and he's checking out her butt pretty hardcore in the first scene that you see him in, and at school anyway. And it's kind of creepy. He's got pictures of her like as his wallpaper.
It's her Instagram.
Oh, is it her Instagram?
Yeah,
oh, okay. I thought it was like his wallpaper.
No.
See, old person syndrome. I had no clue that's what Instagram looked like. Okay, so
the next thing that I have,
okay,
that night when you see somebody watching Peter, he gets a text from his friend saying, "Hey, there's this party, you should come." And so he goes and asks his mom if he can go. And they kind of have like this little quarrel thing happen where they're like both really not pleasant towards each other. And then she asks if Charlie wants to go, or she asks if he's bringing Charlie, and he's like, "Does Charlie want to go?" And mom's like, "Did you ask her?" It's very just passive aggressive like that.
And then just a little bit beyond that, because you didn't write this down, she almost forces Charlie to go.
Yeah, she's like, a little bit later, she's like, "You're going to this party," and Charlie's like, "No, that's okay." And the mom's like, "No, it's not okay. You're definitely going." And the brother Peter watches this. I'm surprised he didn't say anything.
Yeah, I was like, don't. I would have been like, don't make her. If she doesn't want to go, don't force her to go.
Yeah.
The mother was more insistent than the daughter. The what's her name, Charlie, just didn't almost want to seem to go, and the mother
It has the same symbol as the necklace. Yeah. And then they drive by this lamppost that the mom was wearing on it, and they get to this party, and Peter's crush is there. So
they go to smoke weed. He kind of thinks maybe he's going to get lucky.
Yeah.
Because he's like, "Hey, Charlie, stay out here, go eat some cake." And there ends up being two other people in the room, that him and this girl that he's got a crush on. There's like two other people in there, so it ends up just being smoking weed. But the kid, Charlie, eats some of this cake. Now, before she eats the cake, you see people chopping up nuts and putting it in there. You find out way earlier in the movie, and somehow I missed it, that Charlie is allergic to nuts. I have a big problem with this, by the way. We'll get there. But anyway, she eats the cake and then starts having an allergic reaction.
And then the brother carries her out to the car, and they're driving. I think they're driving to the nearest hospital, and Charlie puts the window down. And a lot of people have some issues with this next scene because it's very graphic, and it's a child, and it's just, people are very upset by this. So, warning. But they're driving. Charlie sticks her head out the window because she can't breathe. And there's a deer in the road.
It's a dead animal of some kind.
Yeah. And Peter swerves it to miss it. And when he does, he passes by this pole, and Charlie gets her head knocked off when he passes the pole.
And then he just kind of gets real silent and then drives home. And I have the question here, and wouldn't he have gotten in trouble? He left the scene of an accident. Someone died as he was driving. I don't know how vehicular manslaughter works, but someone died while he was driving. He drove away from the scene. I just have a really hard time believing that he wouldn't have had to go to court or juvenile court or the cops would have come or something, and you never see any kind of suggestion that happened.
And then he didn't sleep that night, the night that it happened. And the next morning, the mom, Annie, goes and gets in the car, and you hear her scream. And then the next scene is brutal to watch because she's just like, she gives so much energy into her performance, and it's so hard to watch her, like, just wail because she's lost her daughter. It's very hard to watch.
It is. It's definitely difficult to watch. And one of the first nights that she, after her crying and after the funeral, that she tries to get some sleep, she goes and sleeps in the treehouse because I guess Charlie slept there a lot. It was really hard to see because it was blending in.
The
with
next
part
word
of
that you see is
stuff is-
Laza.
So, I did make a note here that the boy, what's the boy's name?
Peter.
That Peter starts seeing things shortly after Charlie's death.
Mm-hmm.
I made a note there. It's about this time that you're introduced to Joan,
Mm-hmm.
and I just came up with this. Was she not at that first meeting?
She was at the first
Was
meeting,
she? Okay.
yes.
I tried to pay enough attention, but I didn't. I must have missed it.
I saw her.
So she was there.
Yeah.
Man, I was hoping that maybe. I wonder if she just randomly went, or if the story that she tells is actually true. If she just
Oh no,
randomly.
she's part of the cult.
Yeah, but how did she know that Annie was going to be there that particular night? Did she just continue going every week after Annie's mom? What's her name? After
Ellen.
After Ellen dies, does she just go every week until one day, boom, Annie shows up? Or was the story she told true? So let's talk about that. So Joan tells Annie, and Joan is played. Do you have it written down? Who she's played by?
The actress who's in *Handmaid's Tale*.
And her name is going to be right here. Really good actress. I loved that show. I loved her in that show. The show itself was okay, but her performance in that show was excellent. But anyway, we're getting off the topic. So Joan talked about how her son died and her grandson drowned.
Mm-hmm.
Grandson was like 7.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get any indication to how old the son was. So even though we didn't have an indication of how old the son was, we know that they both died.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little curious of the circumstances underneath that, with knowing that she is part of this cult. But we're not really given any indication. So,
But Joan gives her number. Joan gives Annie her number, and we see Annie working on a miniature later, and she goes to grab something, and you think that her hand hits a paint bottle because the paint knocks over, but watching it again, I realized she did not hit that paint bottle. The paint bottle knocked over on its own.
really?
Yeah.
I still watching it again. So this is the second time watching it for me.
I've seen it like 4 times by now.
Okay. So I didn't notice that. That's a good eye.
But at some point, but anyway, so after she knocks the paint bottle over, it makes a mess of Joan's number. But as she's cleaning the number off, she sees it, and I think you assume that she calls Joan because she goes to Joan's address, and she goes there and they talk
before we go too far, I want to talk about this before we get into what happens when they talk, because I don't remember when this happens in the story. So Annie talks about sleepwalking.
That's during this scene.
That's during this scene. Okay.
Yeah, because she goes to Joan's house. They talk about how Joan's, grandson died, and then Annie talks about how Charlie died, and Joan asks how her relationship with her son is, and she talks about how she used to sleepwalk, and she did this thing while she was sleepwalking where she poured paint thinner on both Charlie and Peter that were sleeping in the same bed, and then she poured paint thinner on herself, struck a match, woke up, put the match out, realizing what was going on, but Peter has never really seen her in the same light again.
It woke him up as well.
Yeah.
And so it kind of helps determine why, or explain why the relationship is so tense with Peter and Annie. You can tell that the relationship is tense, but you're not really sure why until this point.
Then we kind of cut to a really big argument between the family, which I know this scene is hard to watch because it's an argument, but I love this scene because it's just so well shot.
Before we get to that, I write down the words in capital letters with lots of exclamation points, slow burn. You sit there watching them eat in silence for like...
Oh, yeah.
10 minutes. I know it's not 10 minutes. I wish I would have timed it. Because it seems like forever that they're just sitting there just eating. And it's just silence. Oh, it just absolutely... I get a little annoyed about it. But then, yeah, you're right. So the mom blows up at dinner. So during this argument and the mom blowing up, one of the things that really kind of hit home at the mom and really kind of put her in her place is Peter asked her why Charlie was at the party to begin with, because the mom outright blames Peter for Charlie's death during this argument. That's partially what makes that argument so difficult to watch. And Peter asks, well, why was she there at the party to begin with? And then, so the next thing that you see is Annie has gone to the store to get material for her work, building of the miniatures. And I wrote down here that Joan kind of keeps showing up. She showed up when Annie had come back to the group, and then she shows up randomly while Annie is leaving this store. I find it really interesting. I wonder if part of the cult kind of reported back to Joan saying, hey, Annie's here, come. And she tells her about a medium that she had met, and how she had come in contact with her grandson and how to perform, and said she learned how to perform this ritual where she could contact her grandson. And then go ahead, I'll let you kind of talk about that ritual.
So Annie goes to Joan's house, and Joan does the seance for her, and some ghostly things happen, like some wind in Annie's face, some writing on a chalkboard, and it all freaks Annie out. So Annie tries to leave, but right before Annie leaves, Joan gives her some words to say to try the seance at home. The words, I think some online people would agree with me, the words are not to do the seance. The words are to summon payment into Annie's body. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Dog?
I think it's definitely, if nothing else, it's to help bring the household to a certain place, as you had said before, because she did make the note. Oh, please stop doing that. That it was important that everyone be in the house when she read the ritual.
Then we kind of cut to a bad dream that Annie is having, where she sees ants coming out of Peter's head. And you think she wakes up because she's standing in the room with Peter and she's having a conversation with Peter. It's not a pleasant one, but she is having a conversation with him nonetheless. And during the conversation, all of a sudden Peter gets wet with, you're not sure with what at first, and then Annie gets wet, and then she has matches in her hand, so you think it's paint thinner, and you see flames, but then she wakes up, which is
it was all a dream.
Requiem, and then the next, that's when you see the next. Oh, maybe it was pandemonium. Again, the words are very hard to see.
Sorry, I was also trying to look at my notes here. So, was it that next day that she does the ritual then? Because I wrote down here that Charlie manifests in the mom. This is after the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie manifests in the mom, and then which freaks everybody out. So drawings start happening in a book, and Annie goes to burn this book, but every time that when she tried, she set herself on fire. And she kind of starts putting things together a little bit, and she begs the father, whose name Steve. You don't find out this guy's name until halfway through the movie. I know I mentioned it once, but I've just got to mention it again. She begs Steve to burn the book, and when he does, he actually.
Well, there's kind of a little bit of a exchange that happens. She begs him to burn the book. He doesn't. She's like, "Fine, I'll do it." She takes the book from him. She throws the book in the flames, and then he still sets the blaze.
He sets on fire, yeah. And
which is a little bit confusing because if burning the book burned her before, why didn't it burn her this time? Why did it burn Steve? That is a little bit confusing.
Yeah, it was. Well, we can talk about all the confusing things that happen a little later. When she does burn the book, and he burns up, you see this kind of almost flash of light happens, and that's when you kind of are given the impression that the spirit takes over Annie. Oh, that was my last note, and I know there's more stuff that happens after that.
Yeah, so the spirit takes over people whenever people whenever people have officially lost their marbles, and her seeing her husband burn alive was what did it to her. And then so the spirit takes over her. We get a cut shot of it being daytime, or it being night, it being daytime, and then it cuts to it does turn into a very cool shot. You see a bunch of naked people standing in the yard of the house, around the house. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
And then this whole time Peter has been sleeping, because earlier that day while he was at school, he bashed his own face into his desk because, like, either Payman or Charlie was trying to possess him. In a way, Payman and Charlie are the same entity, because after Charlie dies, they become connected. So they both kind of possessed Peter. and he bashes his own face into his desk, and so he gets sent home. He's asleep while the whole dad getting burned alive thing happens, and then he wakes up in the middle of the night. And when he wakes up, I love this scene. You see him laying in bed, and he sits up, and the entire time he's like in bed with the mom, debating on what he wants to do in the corner of the room. No, in his room. In his room. There, she is in the corner of the room when he goes into the living room, but in his room too, she's there.
Oh, okay.
And then so he goes into the downstairs area, but he doesn't finds his dad burned. You see again his mom in the corner. See her. He does see, however, when he naked man was the same naked man, or the same naked man, clothed man, and at the funeral earlier.
Oh, see, you're good at noticing things like that, because I didn't recognize any of them. But then he kind of freaks out, and his mom starts chasing him.
Yes.
And he runs up into the attic and closes the door behind him. And you see her bashing her head into the attic door, which is on the ceiling.
Yeah, because it's so creepy, because you don't know what exactly is being bashed against the attic door at first, and then it shows you, and it's her bashing her head. It's so creepy.
And then the next thing that kind of happens is he's in the attic, and then I'm not sure how Annie gets up there, but she gets into the attic, demon magic, and she's sawing her own head off with a piece of piano wire, and the sound.
I love it's such a creepy good scene. I love the sound design. It's just you hear the squelching, and it's so good.
Yeah, and then
that's what does it for Peter, because he officially loses his marbles at this point. Looks to see some naked people in his attic.
He screams, jumps out the window, and then falls to the ground. I had wondered if maybe, at least physically, he died here, and then Payman still kind of lived in him, because you do see Payman's spirit enter the body, and get up and walk into the treehouse, and they proclaim him, all hail Payman, and all this stuff. I kind of wish at this point you would have seen them get their reward and he kill all of them. I think that would have made the ending of that, this movie, so much better. Is him just slaughter the whole treehouse.
Well, let's talk about, but that's officially the end of the movie. The movie ends with them all proclaiming "Hail King Payman." It's very I've not seen this movie, but it's very Wicker Man-esque. But let's talk about our thoughts on the movie. I love this movie. I will admit it's a very slow first 30 minutes of the film, but after Charlie dies, I think that's when the movie starts getting really good, because you get all these tense scenes between the family members. Everybody's slowly losing their marbles, questioning what's real and what's not. And then the last 15 minutes are just so good, so dark, so many hidden figures in the shadows, such good sound design, so many awesome things happening, that chill you to the core, like the mom sawing her own head off. Every time I see that scene, I just So let's talk about why you hate it.
I don't hate it. Well, so there's a person out there who talks about horror movies that talked about this film and how difficult it can be to watch the first time. It's really hard to follow and figure out what's going on. A second watching of this movie and watching that particular person's discussion about it between the first time I watched it and this time watching it definitely helped me understand it more, which helped me enjoy it a little bit more. But it's just there are some things that are really like far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that gets me so much is, well, I guess we're going to just put it out there, is Charlie's allergic reaction.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a smallish child, I mean, this child's 12,
Mm-hmm.
she knows how to take care of herself, that has a very dangerous nut allergy, you know to keep an EpiPen on you, because you never know. I mean, there can be nuts in like craziest of places. Stuff that you wouldn't even necessarily consider having nuts, but it's because it's made in places with nuts,
Mm-hmm.
could potentially have nuts on it. This child should know to have an EpiPen on her at all times.
Mm-hmm.
They go to this party and she has this allergic reaction. And she doesn't have an EpiPen. Okay, maybe I can forgive that. But how do they set it up to know that this child's going to put down her window at a specific point and go buy this light pole that's going to knock her head off? I mean, it's so fantastical. The odds of like all that coming together have got to be astronomical. Somebody who is good at statistics out there might comment below and give us how astronomical those odds are. I'd love to see them. And then, like, I guess, again, it's the ending that almost bothers me even more. Like, well, no, I know what it is. This movie has trouble, like, having an identity. Like, is it a cult movie? Not like has a cult following, like Rocky Horror Picture Show, but is it a movie about a cult, a cult, or is it a movie about a demon? Is it a movie about it? And I think you can have both things and both things done well. I didn't think it was done so great here. Now the movie itself, like, I think you're right. It's shot very well. It's written well. I think the actor's portrayal in the film, outside that poor dad,
The poor dad who has maybe 10 lines.
10
in the
lines,
whole film.
is just he kind of just seems like whatever that actor is, kind of seemed like he maybe just came for the paycheck. He just does not. I don't know, but I think everybody else's acting is really good. I think it's not a terrible movie. It's just not one of my favorites because of some of the things that I mentioned. Slow burn. It feels like maybe it's 15 minutes too long. That last scene of him walking to the treehouse, like, gotta be 20 minutes. You're kind of like editing. Anything else that you want to say about it?
No.
If you've not seen this movie, I recommend watching it at least once. No, watch it twice. You're going to pick up things the second watching. So definitely check it out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. And
The next movie we're going to be doing
yes, I was about to say, the next movie that we're going to be doing is Silence of the Lambs. That's my favorite film. And so yeah, just be on the watch out for that. But until next time, I'm Dee.
And I'm Max.
And this is Movies to the Max.